All right. Homework was what? Add menu system to allow you to create rooms.
Connect existing rooms.
Right. Connect existing rooms. So you have to show a list of rooms because what we could do right now is we could create a room, move into that room, and even though so I think we originally started with the CS hallway. We created S120, move into S120, then we want to go back to CS hallway. So it created like a new version of CS hallway when we really want to get back to the existing hallway. So we need a couple of things here. So we want to be able to list existing rooms inside of our game. And then we also need to be able to then select an existing room that we want an exit to lead to rather than creating a brand new room. Does that sound accurate? Okay. So let's see where we left off here. Oh, it's currently broken because I have an else in there, right? All right, so here's our else. So this is where we need to show a list of existing rooms and be able to uniquely identify them. So different, let me move this over here so we have a little bit more space. Yeah, whatever. Oh, by the way, it's Dr. Locklear's birthday today, so if you see him in the hall, you should like sing to him or something. Just heads up. Okay, so right now we have our, you type in a -1, you dive out of the game, right? Otherwise, if you type in create, that means that it's going to go into the mode for create. So now we're asking what kind of room is this, a new or an old room? All right, so if the option we type in is new, so this guy needs to be a string, right? If option is new, then we want to say in what direction should we add the room, what is the name of the room, what is the description. So it actually is going to create the brand new room. So right here is where we actually create a brand new room called new room with new room name and new room description. Then we add that room to our global list. So every dungeon has a list of rooms, right? Keeps track of a list of rooms. Those rooms don't understand necessarily, well, the rooms themselves know, but that list of rooms isn't keeping track of where those rooms are relative to each other. It's just a list of rooms. We could probably write a sort that maybe sorts the rooms in the by title or something like that. But right now, it's just in the order in which those rooms were added. They're in that list. All right, so every single time we create a new room, we go ahead and just toss it into that list that our dungeon keeps track of. But then we go ahead and whatever the room the player is currently in, so the player's current room, we add a new room. What room? The room we just created. In what direction? The direction that they entered in. That make sense? So that's where we're actually linking this room to another room. But then somewhere over here, we have this giant list of just all the rooms in this dungeon. All right, so the very first thing we need to do here, that's if we do create, and that's if they specifically had the option new. They chose new for what they want to do. Otherwise, they must have chosen old, which means we need to show them a list of existing rooms. Huh? Well, right, but for right now, we're not validating their. If they didn't type in new, they must have meant old. that's what we're handling here. We certainly could do an else if option is equal to old, and that way if they type in something other than that, we say, hey, don't be an idiot or something like that. But let's keep this as I guess as easy as possible here. So if they didn't put new, they must mean old. So we need to go ahead and let's just show them, for right now, let's just show them the list. We're not even going to ask for any input. If they type in old, we just show them a list of all the rooms, proving that we can give them that list of rooms. Our list of rooms is stored inside of this variable called self.rooms. And maybe we show them the room name for them, because room name plus room description might get a little bit long, right? So we might want to see S120, S118, stuff like that. All right, so inside here, let's go ahead and show them the list of rooms. So we'll say for room in self.rooms. This is going to loop us through every room in that list of rooms. And we could call this guy anything we wanted. I just happen to name the variable room. Okay. If I want to call it LOL, that's fine. For LOL in self.rooms, I'll come in here and I'll print LOL dot, name. It's probably spelled a little bit better than that, but let's just quickly look at, yeah, a room has a name. So that's what we want to print out, is that room's name. All right, that makes sense? So this was kind of a common misconception that some people had, really I've actually had in some of the recent homework assignments, that this for each loop says, for this variable name, make this variable name equal each element in this collection each time through. So you can name this LOL, you can name it whatever you want. It would make sense for us, since this guy is a collection of rooms, for us to name this guy room. For each room in this collection of rooms, do something. What are we going to do? We're going to print out the current room's name. Does that make sense? All right, so that's how a for each loop works. All right, so we'll print out the room's name. And for right now, let's just leave it at that. This will just give us a full dump of all the room names. So let's run this guy again. So here's our boring hallway. So when we created our dungeon, we gave it that starting hallway, right? That was the initial room where we come in. Well, now it says, where would you like to go? Actually, we probably need to have a little bit of a better option there, because right now we know we can type in create, and then it comes into this, what kind of room would you like? Let's go ahead and do a new room. What direction should we add this room? Let's do it to the south. What's the name of the room? S120. Description of the room, Lippmann classroom. All right, so now we see that we have a exit to the south. Whatever, the S120. All right, so let's go ahead into S120. So I'll take the direction to the south. Now we're here. So we're in S120, which is Lippmann classroom. There are currently no exits in here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now the idea is that I would want to link back to an existing thing, the hallway out there. So I'm going to go ahead and type in old, or as he pointed out, I could type in elephant, anything other than new. And it's going to give me, for right now, what all we wrote is, show me a list of the existing rooms. So here is, where's that guy? Here's CS hallway, and there's S120. And then it went back and it showed us the current room we're in and asked us what we wanted to do. So what I have highlighted right there is our show menu. That's what happens when we show the menu. So our list of existing rooms is right here. That makes sense? So we probably want to make it a little bit thing, maybe say choose an existing room, maybe put some asterisks around it to kind of, make it stand out on the screen so we can kind of find it. But we also need to maybe number these guys, right? So when we ask them what room should we have it lead to, they don't have to type in CS hallway. They can say, oh, I want it to lead to room 1 from the list. Something like that. That make sense? Just so we make it map easily, why don't we list the rooms from 0 on? That way bucket 0 is CS hallway, bucket 1 is S120. It maps up to how our lists are indexed. Lists are indexed from bucket 0 to the length -1. Instead of bucket 1 to the length. All right. So we can choose to make it a little bit more human friendly and say, well, this is room 1, room 2, room 3, and then always subtract 1 from it. Do we have a preference? Do you want to choose room 1 and have it map to room 0? Or do you want to choose 0 and have it map to 0? 0 and have it map to 0, that would certainly be the easier way of doing it. All right, so we'll go in here. So let's go ahead and make this guy a little fancier. So before we show them a list of rooms, let's maybe go print out maybe a bunch of 5 asterisks. Choose a room. 5 more asterisks, something like that. And then maybe after we show all the rooms, we'll print out kind of a finish the sandwich. So it kind of stands out on the screen. You got a bunch of asterisks, you got a list of rooms, and a bunch of more, then more asterisks. And then maybe we give them a which room is equal to input, choose a room, something like that. All right, so let's just get it to that point, and we'll go ahead and just print out which room, proving that we read it in and we can spit it back out. Okay, so our room should look a little bit, our list should look a little bit nicer. Now we decided that we want to have them numbered from 0 to whatever, so before we just print out the room's name, we need to have a number. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and create a variable called pause. We'll start off at 0. Then inside here, we'll say we need the string version of pause, maybe concatenated with, what should it look like? Probably like a period followed by a space, concatenate with the room name. So it'd be like 0 period S120. However you wanted to make it look, but something like that. We do need to get the string version of our pause. Pause was a number because concatenation, using the plus sign here for concatenation, gluing a bunch of strings together, will only work in Python if we have strings on both sides. Okay? But each time through, we need to make sure that we increment pause. That way it goes from 0, then to 1, then to 2, then to 3, so on and so forth. Does that make sense what we're doing right there? Okay, so let's go test this out. If you're looking for how to kill the program, you hit Control-C from the terminal. That should die out on either Windows or Mac, or you can type in -1 and that gets you out too. But if you just want to tell the system to shut it down, Control-C will do it. Okay. So we'll go ahead and do create. Actually, before we forget, let's go ahead and make our little initial menu here a little bit more verbose. We're going to choose, so what would you like to do? We're kind of showing them a menu. They can -1 to quit, create to create a room, or direction. All right, so we won't make it too terribly long here. So here's our player show menu. So we'll go up to our player up here. Here's show menu. We're saying, where would you like to go right now? Now we really want to say, what would you like to do? Now for us right now, we're going to just do -1, create, or direction. Something like that. And we'll just remember what each of those means. In a traditional MUD, a lot of times they'll just say, what would you like to do, and put nothing there. And then one of the commands is, they might put in parentheses, help for options or something like that. So you can type in help, and then gives you a list of the things you might be able to do, but we don't need to overkill this thing. All right, so what would you like to do? -1, create or direction. We'll go ahead and create. What kind of room, a new or an old? We're going to choose a new. In what direction? We're going to do it to the south. What is the name of the new room? We'll say S120. Whitman classroom. And then we'll go ahead and take the exit to the south. Now we're in that room. We'll go ahead and create a new room. We'll choose old, and now we should get our new little menu thing here. So choose a room. 0 is CS hallway, 1 is S120. I might choose 0, and right now all it does is spits that number back to me. We're not using it yet. Okay, so I chose 0. it spit the 0 back. All right. So now I have that number, but it came in as a string. So I need to convert that to a number, and I need to grab the room from self.rooms that corresponds to it, right? And that's the room I set up for my exit. I'm going to do -1 to kill out of that thing. Okay, so at this point, it's the same thing as we did here. But instead of creating a new room, we're going to get an existing room. Then we're going to append that existing room to our list of rooms. Now, do we need to do that? Or is that existing room already in our list of rooms? We don't want to add it twice, correct? If the CS hallway is already in our list of rooms, we don't need to add it again. So these two lines are not required for creating an exit to an existing room, to an old room. All we need is this piece right here. Okay? So we are going to still need to find out what direction they want that room to be in. All right? So I'm going to steal this line. We're going to call this guy old room direction. Oh, I picked the wrong one, but we'll just reuse it anyways. So in what direction should we add this room? That's where we bring in the direction that we're going to add it. So we'll read that in from our user. And then finally, we'll add to the player's current room a new room in that direction. So that's the old room direction. So that's the direction we're going. And the room we chose is, which room is a number? We need to get that room. So we're going to say old room is equal to self.rooms at bucket int which room. So this is going to construct a number out of our string which room, so a 0, a 1, a 2, whatever that is. So that'll turn that into the number 0, 1, or 2. I'll then use that number to get the specific room from the collection of existing rooms that I'm associating. Store that in a variable called old room right now. And then when we go to add a room to our current room, we're going to add it to the direction that we want this guy to go, as well as the room we're leading to is old room, the room we selected. That make sense? All right, so that should be the steps it takes to link back to an existing room. Let's go out here. Let's run this guy. We're going to go ahead and we're going to create what kind of room. It's going to be a new room. What direction? To the south. What is the name of the new room? S120. What is the description of the new room? Littman Classroom. All right, so there's that room to the south. So we'll go ahead and move into that room to the south. Now I want to go ahead and I want to create a room to the north leading back to that hallway. So I'll create, what kind of room is this, a new or an old? It's going to be an old room. What room are we leading to? We want to go back to CS hallway, so we'll choose room 0. Okay, in what direction should we add this room? We'll say to the north. So now we see we have an exit in here to the north, and when I take that, it should lead us to the CS hallway where we should find there's already an exit back to the south leading to this room, because we've linked up to the actual room, the actual existing room. Does that make sense? All right, questions about that stuff? Okay, so now, what would you say are the current weaknesses with our current implementation? Go ahead.
No multiplayer.
Huh?
One thing, there's no multiplayer.
Okay, yeah, so we could certainly say no multiplayer at the same time. We could say there aren't helicopters or goats and
Well,
so that,
because
but
at first you made, you have the option of 2 players, right? But
yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I mean, so certainly it would be, we'd like to get it to the point of maybe having more than one player. But just so assuming we're going to keep it as one player for right now, what's the most annoying thing about our current implementation?
The player could just skip to whatever room they want by entering to create and connecting their current room to said room by the direction of Penguin.
Okay, so I'm not sure that's necessarily a problem, but you're right. That is we'll say in quotes, a feature of our game. If you're the current player and you have this giant dungeon that has 300 rooms in it, okay, really focus on that whole 300 room dungeon aspect here to kind of fishing for a certain answer here. You could certainly find out, create a new exit to the current room in the current room that leads to some room that's 230 rooms deep into the dungeon. That allows you to jump right there. That's fine. Okay, and then maybe we can kind of take it a step further. We can remove exits, right? We can say, let's remove an exit from a room where we get rid of that link. And if we do that, then then we can get to the room, and then we can go ahead and cover up our tracks or something like that, so we don't have to worry about it. But assuming we had a 300 room dungeon, so you got it all written down on paper, so you have a dungeon with 300 rooms in it. What really sucks about our current implementation?
It's going to list all 300 rooms.
Okay. After what? When does it list those 300 rooms?
When you're going to create a new exit.
Every single time we launch our program right now, what do we have to do? We have to create our whole dungeon. How happy would you be if you had a 300 room dungeon and every single time you launched the application, you had to create 300 rooms? You kind of want to do it once. I mean, it's a nice feature to kind of be able to walk through your dungeon and let it kind of organically grow. But once you do that once, you kind of want it to save, right? How are you going to accomplish that?
Never close down.
Never, ever shut down the server. Ever.
It's like not having a memory card.
Is that? So it would be nice to be able to save the information somehow. Now, assuming we had it saved, so let's assume we had our information saved. We need to be able to have some sort of standardized format for recognizing rooms. All right, so for representing a room, let's say. So let me kick back out here. Have we talked about data representation languages? XML and JSON? Does that sound familiar to anybody? I said the words, but we didn't really talk about it. Okay. All right, so data representation languages, not to be confused with programming languages. So this kind of connects a few dots from way, way, way earlier in the semester when we kind of talked about what the nature of a programming language is. So all programming languages, 100% of them allow us to remember stuff, to ask questions, and to do repetition. Okay, so those are kind of like the requirements of a programming language. Okay, now data representation languages don't have those requirements. Now, some evidence of this is a common occurrence that might happen is I might ask somebody, oh, well, what programming languages do you know? So all of you have had 150, right? Okay. So based on what you've learned in here, what you learned in 150, what are the programming languages that you know? So one of them is Python, right? Okay. What else? What else could you maybe even loosely add? Ah, perfect. Fell into my trap. Okay. Is HTML a programming language? What do you use HTML for? Tell me about HTML. Okay. It's true. It's for websites. So what does HTML look like? But aren't all the words, aren't they in a very specific format? HTML, you have things like, you have tags, right? This kind of thing. And then, inside of that HTML tag, you might have the body tag.
You don't necessarily have programs, you just have it's just sort of like it's just a markup language.
So why isn't it okay? That's true, but what? But it's just saying something is a markup language. What does that mean? Isn't that kind of synonymous with me saying it's a data representation language?
Well, it's descriptive rather than prescriptive. You kind of describe what's going on instead of saying the method by which something can go on.
Okay, I kind of like that phrase actually. It's descriptive rather than prescriptive. I might use that. It's actually a pretty good phrase. So really, a data representation language describes what your information describes the various attributes of your information. Somebody else has to interpret that, right? If we write something down in English, okay, those are just words. We're describing a bunch of ideas, right? Whoever reads that needs to be able to understand English and get, they have to have an appropriate level of reading comprehension to be able to read your words and distill meaning from it. Correct? Okay? So, but when you're reading HTML, your doesn't have the ability to remember variables. HTML5 does. HTML5 is more like a programming language, but you can't remember stuff with HTML. You can't write loops with HTML. You can't ask questions with HTML. HTML is all about telling the web browser how it should present this page in terms of what text should be bold and what things should be left justified and right justified and what things should look like lists and things like that. It allows us to describe the various things that are the components of what we think of as a web page. Okay? So this isn't a programming language. He mentioned that it's a markup language. Fine, that's kind of a synonymous word with this idea of data representation or something like that. Okay? Rather than being a programming language, it's a language we use to describe data. Okay? Organize data, something like that. All right, so HTML looks something like this. It's a tag-based language where every opening tag has a corresponding closing tag, and closing tags have the little front slash here at the beginning of the tag. All right, so that's what HTML looks like, and it's been out for a while. Now, how many of you have heard of a language called XML? Okay, so what do you know about XML? Or so one of those buzzwords you've heard of and doesn't really mean much.
Great for RSS feeds.
It's great for what?
RSS feeds.
Okay. Well, what's an RSS feed?
Like when you subscribe to blogs or podcasts.
Okay, but so you're subscribing to a blog, and so you're saying we have this thing called an RSS feed. So it's sending you data, right? Sending you information.
Sending you all the
Yep. So why is XML great for it? What's the purpose of XML for an RSS feed?
I guess it's kind of like the sugar coating on the pure data of the feed.
Okay, so it adds semantics to the data. So instead of the end user being a web browser like it is for HTML, for XML in your particular case, the end user probably wasn't you. You probably could see the XML if you wanted to, but you had some sort of newsreader, right? And the newsreader knew how to, take out that take the data and put it into kind of some sort of page that showed you headlines and then body of it and that kind of stuff. So it would take the XML formatted RSS feed and turn it into data that was easier for a human being to read rather than you looking at a wall of this stuff. But if all you had was a wall of that stuff, it wasn't so complex. You could have probably kind of read it, just wasn't the most friendly format, right? All right, so So you've seen an RSS feed?
Once or twice.
Okay, a couple times. What did it look like?
Bunch of gibberish with various references to the domain on which the
How did the gibberish that you're referring to, did it look anything like this?
trying to remember.
Well, like a dictionary.
Let's go in here real quick. You probably could find an example of an RSS feed somewhere. Maybe get an image of one.
It's very tiny, the very first one. I'm looking at it right now. That one that's from Wikipedia. Like I went to images and clicked on it. It's on video.
Oh, this guy?
If you go to images. And
Let's look at an example. Here we go. All right. So here's an RSS feed. What does that guy look like to you? See this guy? Last build date? This guy / last build date? What does that kind of look like? Looks like HTML. We got an opening tag, you got a closing tag. So XML is a tag-based data representation language. HTML predated XML. But then the XML people looked at it and said, you know what? That's actually a pretty good way of describing data. But what if we wanted to describe data not just for web browsers, but maybe for newsreaders? RSS feed. So RSS was a standard, right? So, or we wanted to do it for X, Y, and Z, maybe a dental office sending patient records back and forth, that kind of stuff. So rather than being stuck with HTML, which has predefined tags like HTML and body and center and H1 and BR and the 50 or so different HTML tags, what if we could just create our own tags? First name and first name tag, last name and last name tag, middle initial and middle initial tag, stuff like that for a patient record. Make sense? But they still look like tags. What's the advantage, do you think, for us to have something that starts with an opening tag like that and ends with a closing tag like this? Why is that helpful? Why is this tag thing helpful? If you're looking at this line of code here, okay, and I tell you to tell me what the title of this is, what would you tell me? RSS title. How did you get that? Okay, now we're going back to week 1 of class, right? We have to describe things in an unambiguous way. How do human beings solve problems? The issue is that we're so good at solving problems that we have trouble articulating how we solved a problem. Okay, so tell me more about this thing about being organized. So you scan through here with your eyes and you kind of saw like, oh, there's some structure to this data, right? And so how did you determine that this was the title instead of this being the title or this? So you looked at these tags. Okay, so you saw that you had this title tag and say, oh, that probably means title, right? Now, how did you know to stop right here? Yeah, you saw this closing tag that matched this opening tag. So you figured that everything in between was the title. Could we use that same logic in a program? Could a program walk through a string and say, okay, I see an opening tag. We know it's an opening tag because it starts with the less than sign, but the next character is not a slash. So we're going to read in that whole tag until we hit the greater than sign. That's the beginning of the tag. Now I'm going to start collecting my actual data. That's the data in between there. Wait a minute, I'm hitting another tag. That's a closing tag. Specifically, it's the closing tag for this title. That means when I hit that closing tag for title, I can go ahead and say I have finished reading in the value associated with title. And here's that value right there. Does that make sense? So we can write a computer program that looks for opening tags, collects everything between an opening tag and a closing tag, and then spits out the information at the end. Pull those pieces of information out. Maybe load it into a dictionary or something like that. Okay? Same thing's true for all these other guys. So giving it some formatting like this, helps. Is there anything wrong with XML? So we look at this document here, what's the actual information here? We have RSS title, we have, this is an example of RSS feed, we have this one link, we have this date, we have another date, here's another item for the entry, here's some text describing it, here's another link, here's a permanent link type thing. This is probably this is a user ID or something like that, probably the person who posted this. But would you say that a majority of this is actual data, or is a majority of this structure, or maybe is it half and half? Is about half of what we're looking at here structure? Has really nothing to do with the actual data itself. It's just giving enough, points of structure for us to be able to piece out the pieces of information. Is this the best way of doing it? What predated something like XML? Let's say I wanted to have a patient record. Let's say a dental office had a spreadsheet of a bunch of patient records where we had first name, last name, and date of birth, something like that. How would you store that information before you knew of XML? Huh? Yeah, but let's say I wanted to take it from one spreadsheet to another, so I need to export the data. It needs to be in some sort of transferable format. How might you write that information down so you don't lose track of it?
Something with extension CSV.
CSV, oh, what is CSV? What does that stand for? Oh, that's great. Let's go with that guy. CSV. What's CSV? Anybody know what that stands for?
Comma separated variable.
Close, comma separated values, but yeah, it's the same thing. Same thing. Okay, so comma separated values. What does that mean? So if I had a first name, a last name, and a date of birth separated by commas, I might have Mike Littman 127. Let's see, I'm 18, so what year is that? 99? Nailed it. I missed that by several decades. So, so that might be a patient record, right? And then maybe I put a semicolon in between. Then I have another patient record with their first name, comma, their last name, comma, their date of birth, so on and so forth. Make sense? So those are comma separated values. Usually, instead of it being like a semicolon, it's a carriage return. So this is the end of a line. We kick it down to another line. Now you have another comma separated values for that stuff. What's wrong with comma separated values here? Go ahead.
Non-descriptive as external.
Okay, so it doesn't really have any description. How do we know? I mean, when you look at this as a human being, you can kind of say, well, that looks kind of more like a first name. This looks more like a last name. And this doesn't look like a name at all, but it looks like a date. Maybe that's the date, the birthday, something like that. I mean, you can make a guess as a human being based on what the data looks like. But nowhere in here are we actually given kind of a precursor for this. Now, most CSV files will have at the top of it kind of a descriptive header that will tell you what the individual values will be, but it's not contained in the data. It's almost like an answer key type thing. Okay. What else? What else is problematic with CSV? Can you have commas in your data in CSV? Because a comma is considered one of the separating things, right? So let's say that you needed to store data with commas in it. Huh? Okay. So you'd have to do something special in order to kind of pull it off, right? Now, back before we had a standard, so CSV is a standard way of getting stuff. It still exists today. You can export an Excel document to CSV, so you can In fact, a lot of times, like you can grab your bank statements, you can download it as a CSV, so you can bring it into a spreadsheet at home for saving it or whatever, or searching through things. So CSV, it's not that it's completely antiquated and nobody uses it anymore, but it is, it has problems. Now, let's say you were writing a piece of software or a video game, something like that, 20 years ago, before some of these data representation languages existed. We'll go 30 years ago. All right, something like that. Excuse me. And you needed to send information, maybe represent objects in some way. You might be tempted to invent your own data representation language, right? So maybe if you want to have information that has commas in it or something like that, well, you can't just use strict CSV. So maybe you decide, I'll just put together an example here. So maybe you decide that your individual pieces of data are separated by like funky characters, things that are extremely unlikely to ever occur. And so maybe it's like less than, minus, winky eye, or equal sign, equal sign, that, or something like that. Then Littman. And then this. Okay. So, can we all agree that it's pretty unlikely that we would ever have data that needed to have this exact series of characters in it as part of the data we're storing? That seems unlikely. We could certainly, make it more random and have more weird stuff in there or something like that, but this feels pretty weird, right? All right, so maybe we fix this problem of not being able to have commas in our data now by saying, oh, well, because my separator is some crazy, key, I'm okay. What's the problem with this kind of approach? Huh? Okay, so it's tedious to write it. Chances are we're probably going to have a computer program that would output it, so it wouldn't be that bad because we're going to be writing a piece of software to do it. But you're right, and certainly a human being looking at it, it's easier to distill the separation of values here than it is down here, right? That's a true statement. Okay, what else is wrong with this guy? Let's say I'm sending the data to you. Okay, so I'm, I have the data. You're downloading it. You're exporting it in crazy format here. Then you bring it to your side. You have to now know how I'm separating my data, and you have to have a program on your end that can reconstitute the data given my proprietary format. So if every piece of software had a proprietary way of representing their data, you all of a sudden now have an issue with software talking to each other, right? And isn't it pretty common today for us to have software that talks to each other? All right, so we need a better way. We saw XML. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about XML next time. But then we're also going to talk about something called JSON. And what we're ultimately going to do is we're going to teach our rooms how to export themselves as a JSON format. All right? Then we're going to go the other direction and say, here's the JSON representation of my dungeon. Read this in and create my dungeon whenever the server starts. Okay? No homework. I'll see everybody on Wednesday.